Hello, I'm Nafisa Latic, and on this special episode of Across the Balkans, an exclusive interview with a European head of state at a time of conflict on the continent. Vjosa Osmani is the 39-year-old president of Kosovo, the youngest country in Europe, and a nation facing its own existential crisis. Its neighbor, Serbia, claims Kosovo as its own territory, even though Kosovo declared independence in 2008. In fact, there are around 80 nations that do not recognize Kosovo's statehood, including Russia, which is mounting a fierce assault on its neighbor, Ukraine. The shelling of cities there and scenes of urban warfare are painfully familiar to the people of the Balkans, which was the site of the last major military confrontation on European soil. Back then, in the 90s, it took a NATO bombing campaign on what was then Yugoslavia to bring an end to Slobodan Milosevic's assault on Kosovar Albanians. And just a few years earlier, NATO bombs had forced Bosnian Serbs to agree to a peace treaty. To this day, relations are incredibly strained between Kosovo, arguably the world's most pro-American country, and Serbia, which maintains close ties with Russia. Their territorial dispute is their key roadblock to joining the EU, and the efforts by Brussels to resolve it haven't made much progress. The president of Kosovo, Vjosa Osmani, joins me now in the studio. Madam President, thank you so much for being our guest on Across the Balkans. I know you're very busy. I appreciate your time. Firstly,
thank you for having me.
What's your reaction on Russia's attacks in Ukraine that we are seeing at the moment?
As you rightly pointed out, the devastating images from Ukraine, and especially the pain that we see across Ukraine from the people of Ukraine, brings back quite a lot of difficult memories for the people of Kosovo, and I would say many people across our region who were victims of genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. And at the same time, it shows how important it is for democratic nations around the world to unite around saving humanity. Because as much as this is about the intentions, the imperialist intentions that Russia has towards Ukraine and other countries that were formerly part of USSR and beyond, it is also about saving the values that we share, which is why we as Kosovo constantly point out to the fact that our collective voice is extremely important now to bring about uniting on these collective values, because it may seem as if this is about Ukraine, but this is so much bigger than that. It's about our democratic way of life, which Russia and its allies are trying to destroy. It's about everything that we have achieved so far that they are trying to destroy. For that reason, we really need, no matter how big or small a country is, we need to make sure that we express the voices of the people that we represent, and at the same time we express the solidarity with the people of Ukraine, which is why Kosovo has been one of the first nations in the world to show this solidarity, to show that we stand with Ukraine, knowing that this is going to be about the world that we want to live in, whether that world is one where a people shows that it can decide on its own fate and the will of that people is respected and its sovereignty is respected, or a world where your neighbor, just because it has more tanks and more weapons, can actually destroy everything that you have achieved, including devastating consequences, which we have seen in the wars of the Balkans. As you know, the latest war in Europe was in Kosovo. The last war in Europe was in Kosovo. And for us, memories are still very fresh, especially because Serbia has still not delivered justice nor asked for forgiveness for the crimes that it has committed.
Speaking of neighbors, I want to talk more about the reaction in the Balkans on the situation in Ukraine. Only country in Europe, beside Belarus, that has not joined EU sanctions against Russia was your neighbor Serbia. They did say we will help Ukrainian people, but we are not joining the sanctions. Is this a sign that that Serbia is choosing Russia instead of EU in these times of crisis? And what does that mean for Kosovo?
I think Serbia has been very clear that it stands with Russia and Russian propaganda on this crisis, because they have neither condemned the aggression and the attacks of Russia on Ukraine, neither have they joined sanctions. And I believe that whoever wants to fool themselves that Serbia is actually going to choose the pro-European path is only appeasing Vučić, who both on character as well as on intentions is exactly the same as Putin. So Russia on one side as well as Serbia on the other are again joining forces to destabilize our part of the world, the Western Balkans as well. From their actions, from their deeds, as well as their rhetoric, we can see that while Ukraine is the first frontliner to defend democracy, the Western Balkan countries, in this case particularly Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, but also countries like Albania and North Macedonia that are part of the Western Balkans, are the second frontliners in defending democracy. And that's why we call on the European Union to be very clear on the language that it uses and the messages that it sends to Belgrade, because they should stop them from sitting on two chairs at once, which is what they have been doing so far. So have some sort of a rhetoric to try to show that they are allegedly pro-European, which in fact they are not. But then at the same time, they have increased over the years their military cooperation with Russia, as well as their political and economic cooperation. And the crisis in Ukraine is the biggest testament to that, when the rest of the world has joined to condemn the Russian aggression and its war of choice against Ukraine, as well as issue sanctions, which is what Kosovo as well has done, fully aligning its sanctions with European Union and the United States. Serbia is the only one who is choosing to stand with Russia and its aggression, showing in this regard that that's what they also intend to do in the Western Balkans.
Mixed messages, you are right, coming from the EU. Former German Chancellor Angela Merkel, I remember describing Alexander Vučić as a man of vision. Because of these mixed messages, we've seen a lot of confusion in the Western Balkans. We've seen the crisis arising in Bosnia. Can the situation in Ukraine embolden in some way Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik to continue with his calls for independence?
Well, Vučić's vision is certainly one of destruction. It has been so since he was Milosevic's Minister of Propaganda. And unfortunately, while his rhetoric sometimes may have changed, his actions have never changed, and his long-term strategy and intentions have not changed. He has territorial claims against Kosovo, against Bosnia and Herzegovina. He wants to destroy Montenegro as an independent and sovereign country. For that reason, I believe that he has been loud and clear on what his intentions are, and so have his actions shown. And in the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, obviously he's using Dodik as a proxy to push forward these intentions that would destroy the unity of Bosnia and Herzegovina as a country. Kosovo has been clear on its support for Bosnia and Herzegovina's territorial integrity, sovereignty, but also its internal unity and functionality as a country, which I believe is crucial not only for Bosnia and Herzegovina itself, but also for our region and the long-term peace and stability. But I believe we have to understand, especially after everything happening in Ukraine, that with the kind of leaders like Vučić and Putin, appeasement never works. So it's either clear language, clear messages, but also clear measures towards them, or we will have the kind of destruction and the kind of destability that they want to push forward.
How significant is for your country, Kosovo, and for Bosnia to accelerate its NATO membership in these times, especially what we've seen in the last couple of days after February 24th?
It has never been more important than now. It's absolutely an imperative, especially when it comes to NATO membership right now. So I do call and appeal on members of NATO to now see membership especially from a security lens, especially from a security perspective, and leave some of the political issues that they usually keep in mind aside for a moment and think how what is going on in Ukraine can have a spillover effect very quickly on the Western Balkans and other parts of Europe. For that reason, to allow both Kosovo and Bosnia-Herzegovina, as well as Ukraine, obviously, right now, to join NATO is an absolute imperative for the security of Europe as a continent, not just for the security of the Western Balkans. When it comes to the European Union, I believe that we have already undertaken the necessary reforms to be allowed to have a candidate status. So accelerating the path towards the European Union for both North Macedonia and Albania, but also for Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo, is extremely important at this point to show that the European Union, but Europe as a continent, is uniting against Russian aggression and the aggression that its proxies in our part of the world might use.
What is Moscow's endgame in the Balkans?
It is the same that it has been for years, and I would say decades. Practically, Russia is against the values-based systems that NATO and the European Union represent. By destabilizing the Western Balkans, by destroying our sovereign countries, they also go after the EU and NATO and what these two unions represent. So practically, they're not just after us. They're after much more than that. Because a Europe whole, free, and at peace will not be a Europe free, whole, and at peace without having the Western Balkans and our part of the world joining the European Union. And obviously, what is going on in Ukraine right now and the latest statements by Kremlin show that NATO is not their only problem. This is not just about Ukraine and other countries joining NATO, but they want to destroy or they want to attack Ukraine's right to exist as a sovereign nation that respects the will of its people. It's the same with the Western Balkans. They have never come to the terms with the fact that countries like Kosovo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, and others are sovereign, independent, and they will remain so because Kosovo is here to stay. Kosovo isn't going anywhere as a sovereign and independent republic. We will be such forever. And obviously, Kremlin's imperialist intentions, as well as Serbia's hegemonic intentions against our countries, are such that they want to destroy our very own right to exist. And it should be clear to each and every one of them that we shall never give up on our right to exist as a sovereign country.
Right. What was the message that you would like to send to Brussels in these times? What can the EU do to protect countries like Kosovo and Bosnia in the wake of Ukraine crisis?
Well, first of all, the EU should finally understand that with leaders that have hegemonic approaches towards their neighbors, appeasement never works. Therefore, to make sure that if Serbia continues with its alignment with Russia, which is exactly what it's doing right now, that their European path their European perspective should not exist any longer. Secondly, the European Union needs to understand that funds should go hand in hand with the values that these countries represent. So Serbia could not move on without rule of law, being so corrupt and without fighting crime and corruption any longer, and at the same time receive so many funds from the European Union. I believe that the more countries invest in democracy and rule of law and human rights, the more funds should be accessible to them because it encourages them. In the other side, if these do not go hand in hand, I think it will only continue to encourage the Serbian hegemonic intentions towards the Western Balkans. At the same time, when we hear the words good neighborly relations, they should go beyond rhetoric. We need to ask the countries to actually show not just words, but also walk the talk when it comes to good neighborly relations. And unfortunately, what we have seen so far is that Serbia has shown no interest in that, but doing the exact opposite, especially towards my country. So the EU should seek for more evidence rather than just rhetoric.
How significant is the role of Turkey, having in mind this assertive and influences coming from Russia and China and Western Balkans? What's the role of Turkey in all this? Can Turkey in some way help the Western Balkans to protect themselves from Russian and Chinese influences?
Turkey has been one of the nations that has supported so much the people of Kosovo and the people of Bosnia and the region as such. But in particular, I want to take this opportunity to express our gratitude and the gratitude of the people of Kosovo towards Turkey and its people for the historic support that we received during the 90s, as well as while Kosovo has rebuilt itself throughout the years and moved on with its state-building efforts. It's one of the first countries that has recognized our independence, as well as a country that has supported us so much in the recognition process and the process of membership in international organizations. As you know, the economic cooperation between Kosovo and Turkey is excellent, but I think we still haven't achieved the potential that there is out there, which is why I focus a lot on making sure that we bring Kosovo businesses and Turkish businesses closer together in their cooperation. Kosovo right now is thriving when it comes to so many areas. We are top performers in the region when it comes to fighting crime and corruption, as well as the economic growth and the GDP growth. And I believe that the close proximity, as well as the fact that we have free trade agreements, not just with Turkey, but also with the European Union and beyond, can bring about more economic cooperation. At the same time, we are very grateful for the voice that Turkey has used internationally. President Erdogan in particular, in supporting the people of Kosovo and supporting our strive to live as a free and sovereign nation and as an equal member of the international community. So we will continue this excellent cooperation, and hopefully we can open new chapters of cooperation.
Can Ankara help Kosovo to get more countries to recognize its statehood? We know that still countries like Russia, China, India, Ukraine still haven't recognized Kosovo. So what are you doing when it comes to that? And can Ankara help?
It certainly can, and it has so far quite a lot, and I need to recognize that for sure. You mentioned at the beginning of this interview that about 80 countries don't recognize Kosovo, but we should remember that more than 100 do. So the vast majority of the world have recognized Kosovo, and Ankara has given quite a great of help. Of course, we are working together with President Erdogan in this regard, because his voice is very much respected across the world, to make sure that, especially with countries that we haven't had the chance so far to sit and explain our arguments and make our case and show that, whether historically or politically, but most importantly, from a legal point of view and a moral point of view, the people of Kosovo, because of all that long and difficult struggle, deserve to be recognized. We do hope that we can work together with Turkey to make sure that these countries that haven't made that decision yet will do that soon. Obviously, it's quite a complex and difficult process, but our patience is not going to grow thin. We will continue until the very end, until Kosovo gets its deserved place in the international community.
I want to go back to Ukraine crisis now. First, refugees are arriving in the Balkans. We're getting reports from Romania and Croatia. Is Kosovo also going to accept refugees from Ukraine, as they did in case of Afghan refugees? We've been reporting that Kosovo was one of the first countries that said they will accept Afghan refugees too. And is Kosovo capable or ready? Do you have enough means to accept people in case they come to your doors?
We have already informed our partners in the very first days after the crisis in Ukraine that, should the need arise, Kosovo will again keep its doors and its hearts open in order to make sure that refugees from Ukraine can find a safe haven in our country. Obviously, we believe again that this is a moral imperative. Back in 1998, 1999, the world kept its doors open for Kosovo refugees. I was a refugee myself, so we're two-thirds of Kosovo people were either refugees or IDPs. We truly understand the pain, and we truly understand the importance of now lending a helping hand to people in need. Obviously, there are limited capacities, but within the capacities that exist, just like with the refugees from Afghanistan, we're ready to open the door and do everything we can to ease the pain of the people of Ukraine during these difficult times.
Madam President, you mentioned you've been a refugee. I've been a refugee too, as my home country is Bosnia. And I know that you have two daughters. Are you optimistic that they will have better future and better lives than we had in the last 20, 30 years in the Balkans?
As I see democratic nations uniting with one another to say no to Russia's aggression and its proxies, I am very optimistic that the world will join around human values. And for that reason, I am more optimistic for the future of my daughters and all of the kids and children of our region, as well as those around the world. I believe that precisely because of the great sufferings that our countries had to go through, we understand better than anyone else the value of freedom and the value of humanity. For that reason, we will more than ever join our voices and collectively work to make sure that what happened to us should never happen to anyone else again.
But in the 90s, when we saw pictures from Bosnia and later on from Kosovo, the world said never again. In the last couple of days, we are seeing very similar pictures coming from Kiev, very similar to ones we've seen in Sarajevo. Are you really hopeful that this time will be different? And how did it make you feel when you've seen those pictures again? For me, it was like reliving it all over again.
It is like that for all the people of Kosovo. And every day when I go to work with co-workers, we talk about how, you know, we'll look at our children when they wake up and we think of every single parent in Ukraine and the horrors that they have to live through, especially those that have little children, and how devastating it is for each and every one of us. We are a very little country, and obviously what we can do is not that much. But solidarity, keeping our doors open, and uniting with the rest of the world to help as much as we can is so crucial at this moment in time. You rightly said, we've heard so many people saying never again. But for us in Kosovo, this is not just a slogan. It's not just a slogan. It is our way of life. We really need to make sure that we stop the sufferings in Ukraine and that no measure is left aside to stop from happening what we saw in the Balkans, what we saw in Kosovo and in Bosnia. Because I believe that quite a lot of measures of appeasement that we saw in the past couple of years have led to a situation that is very difficult right now. But the world now understands that while oligarchs may change in a country like Russia, while leaders may change in a country like Serbia, unfortunately, their intentions do not. So now it's very clear who stands where, who stands in the side of humanity and democracy, and who is in the opposite side of history. Kosovo has always stood in the right side of right. We are very proud of that, and I do hope that the world will do anything in its capacity to stop the sufferings of innocent people in Ukraine.
But Madam President, how to stop people from leaving the Western Balkans? Kosovo, as many other countries in the region, are facing a massive problem of brain drain. That's something that we have been doing on this show constantly. What can be done to, even if it's a good future, I'm thinking sometimes who will be there to see it? Because most of the young people are leaving their home countries, especially in Bosnia, in Kosovo, in Croatia, as of recently too.
As you rightly pointed out, this is one of the biggest problems for the region. In these months that we took over power, we fully understood that the reason why the people of Kosovo overwhelmingly voted for the coalition that we represented was because our platform was jobs and justice. And it was because we understood what were the biggest problems for creating new jobs and a perspective for youth especially was those that related to a lack of justice. And equality of all before the law. So for that reason, all of our reforms that are happening at a record pace are focused on this. And we believe that we already see the first results of this, where Kosovo has jumped 17 places in the index, Transparency International Index of Fighting Crime and Corruption. It's doing very well when it comes to its economy, despite of the pandemic, with almost a 2-digit GDP growth. And at the same time, we show an increase on FDI, foreign direct investment, a trust of domestic businesses in increasing their investment in Kosovo, and of course, quite a big increase in tax collection. So these are very optimistic elements at the very beginning of our mandate. But obviously, I have to say that we cannot change problems that have piled over 20 years overnight. And I do hope for the patience of the people of Kosovo while we work hand in hand with them and everyone that is good intentioned in Kosovo to make sure that we make Kosovo one that all of its citizens, especially its youngsters, will be proud of.
And at the end, let me just ask you if I can tell you 3 things. What is the main priority for your administration in the upcoming months, and some kind of message to the people of the Western Balkans? What has been done to protect them for their safety, for their security, especially in these times, as people are very worried that the situation in Ukraine could easily spill over to the Western Balkans?
I already mentioned two, so obviously our priorities main creating a better perspective when it comes to employment, especially for youth and women. Secondly, make sure that there's justice for all, because unless we are effective in fighting crime and corruption, we will not be effective in anything else. And thirdly, to make sure that there is a secure environment despite of the security threats and the spillover effect that Ukraine might have. So for that reason, I am working very closely with the presidents of the region, especially the 5 countries that we are in the Western Balkans. Obviously, Serbia hasn't shown that willingness for us to work together to make sure that we ensure a safe and secure environment. So Kosovo's institutions have been taking every single possible measure to make sure that we do not allow destabilization in our region. And we have been doing this hand in hand and in full coordination with the United States, the European Union, as well as friendly nations like Turkey. So that, of course, and all these 3 elements together make sure that while we work for these reforms internally, we will also shine externally. So making sure that internationally Kosovo has a good standing has been a priority of mine as president and as head of foreign policy. So I am working with nations around the world to make sure that we flourish our bilateral relations and we help to move on to make sure that we have a better standing in the international arena.
Madam President, thank you so much. It was a pleasure of having you here on Across the Balkans. Thank you, and I hope to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you. The pleasure all mine.
Thanks for watching this special edition of Across the Balkans. Our guest was Vjosa Osmani, the President of Kosovo. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye for now.